Laura believed she knew the man she married, and Mark believed his secret would never follow him home. For years, they lived under the same roof while moving in opposite emotional directions, bound together by routine rather than truth. What began as small, easily ignored changes slowly transformed into a hidden betrayal that would explode in the most unexpected place. By the time their families gathered to celebrate unity and tradition, the marriage was already broken beyond repair. No one at that reunion understood they were about to witness the moment when a carefully protected lie collapsed, exposing how one secret affair could destroy not just a relationship, but an entire family's sense of trust. From the outside, the family appeared flawless, the kind of family people admired without question. Mark was known as a reliable and hardworking office manager who rarely missed a day of work. He left the house early every morning, returned late in the evening, and spoke often about deadlines and responsibilities. To neighbors and relatives, his dedication was proof of his commitment to providing a stable life. Laura, his wife, supported this image quietly. She managed the home, attended family events, and never spoke poorly of her husband. Together, they seemed balanced and secure, a couple that had survived the pressures of adulthood without visible cracks. Their marriage had lasted over a decade, built on routine and shared history rather than open emotion. Family members often commented on how calm their relationship looked. There were no public arguments, no dramatic scenes, only polite smiles and respectful distance. This calm was mistaken for happiness. In reality, it was a fragile surface hiding unspoken tension. Laura had learned to accept long silences and unanswered questions, telling herself that stability mattered more than affection. The upcoming family reunion was meant to be another display of this perfect image. It was planned months in advance at a quiet countryside resort, chosen for its peaceful setting and large gathering space. Relatives from different cities were expected to attend, including people who had not seen Mark and Laura in years. For Mark, the reunion was an opportunity to reinforce his reputation as the dependable husband and successful professional. For Laura, it carried a heavier weight. She felt a growing sense of unease she could not explain, as if the event would change something permanently. As preparations continued, Laura watched Mark carefully. He seemed confident, almost careless, unaware of the silent distance forming between them. Family photos from previous reunions lined the walls of their home, each one capturing. The changes in Mark did not arrive suddenly. They appeared slowly, blending into daily life in ways that were easy to ignore at first. He began spending more time on his phone, holding it at an angle that kept the screen hidden. Notifications were silenced, and calls were taken in separate rooms. When Laura entered, the conversations stopped without explanation. At first, she told herself it was work pressure, the kind that demanded privacy and focus. She had seen stressful periods before and assumed this was no different. As weeks passed, his routine shifted further. Dinner together became rare, replaced by late arrivals and tired excuses. His energy at home felt drained, while his appearance before leaving for work seemed more carefully prepared than usual. Small details stood out to Laura: new cologne, freshly pressed shirts, and an unusual attention to how he looked. These details planted questions she tried to bury, but they refused to fade. Laura noticed that Mark's patience had grown thin. Simple questions were met with short answers, and shared moments were brushed aside. He spoke less about his day, avoiding specifics and changing subjects quickly. When she asked about upcoming work trips or meetings, the responses felt rehearsed, lacking the natural flow they once had. Trust, which had been silent but strong for years, began to weaken. One evening, Laura found herself alone in the living room, listening to the quiet hum of the house. Mark was late again. A familiar feeling of anxiety settled in her chest, sharper than before. She realized she was no longer waiting out of habit, but out of fear of what his absence might mean. The realization startled her. It was the first time she admitted that something was wrong. From that moment, Laura started observing rather than assuming. She paid attention to patterns, times, and excuses. The more she noticed, the more the pieces refused to fit together. What once felt like a stable marriage now felt uncertain. Laura did not search for the truth immediately. Instead, it revealed itself through repetition and coincidence. Certain names began to appear again and again whenever Mark spoke about work. Among them, one stood out more than the rest. Emily was mentioned casually, almost carelessly, yet far too often to feel normal. Her name was tied to meetings, shared projects, and sudden changes in Mark's schedule. At first, Laura tried to dismiss it as imagination, but the pattern grew impossible to ignore. She noticed that Mark's mood shifted after certain workdays. On some evenings, he returned home unusually upbeat, distracted in a way that felt unfamiliar. On others, he seemed tense and defensive, as if carrying a secret too heavy to hide completely. These emotional swings often followed days when Emily's name had come up. Laura began connecting moments that once felt meaningless, now forming a clear and unsettling picture. Without invading his privacy directly, Laura relied on observation. She paid attention to timing, locations, and habits. Mark's late nights followed a predictable rhythm. His explanations lacked detail, and his stories no longer matched earlier ones. Small contradictions appeared, and instead of correcting them, he avoided the subject altogether. Silence became his shield. Laura also noticed changes in how Mark spoke about his workplace. He described it with a strange mix of excitement and frustration, as if something there both energized and consumed him. Business trips appeared more frequently, often announced at the last minute. Each one added another layer to Laura's growing certainty. This was no longer just about long hours or professional stress. The realization came quietly, without drama. Laura understood that what she was witnessing was not a passing phase, but a deliberate double life. The betrayal felt deeper because it was carefully woven into everyday routines. She felt shock, then grief, and finally clarity. Once the truth settled in, Laura resisted the urge to confront Mark immediately. Anger came in waves, but she forced herself to stay calm. She understood that a rushed reaction would only give him space to deny everything or hide his actions more carefully. Instead, she chose silence. That silence was not weakness, but control. Each day, she carried on as usual, preparing meals, responding politely, and maintaining the image of normalcy while her thoughts worked relentlessly beneath the surface. Laura began thinking about timing. The family reunion, now only weeks away, stood out in her mind. It was the one moment when Mark would be surrounded by people who trusted him completely. Parents, siblings, cousins, and close relatives would all be present, sharing stories and celebrating family bonds. Laura realized that this setting, filled with honesty and tradition, was the last place Mark would expect his secret to surface. The idea frightened her, yet felt strangely right. She carefully reviewed what she knew, replaying events and connections to make sure her understanding was solid. There was no room for doubt or emotional confusion. If she was going to reveal the truth, it had to be done clearly and without hesitation. Laura gathered proof through careful observation, making note of dates, patterns, and inconsistencies. Each confirmed detail strengthened her resolve. At night, when the house was quiet, Laura questioned herself. She wondered if exposure would bring relief or regret. The thought of public humiliation weighed heavily on her conscience. But so did the years of trust she had given without question. She understood that protecting the truth mattered more than protecting appearances. As the reunion approached, Laura's calm grew stronger. Her emotions did not disappear, but they sharpened. Fear turned into determination. She was no longer reacting to betrayal. She was shaping its outcome. Mark remained unaware, moving confidently through his routine. The day of the family reunion arrived under clear skies, giving the gathering a warm and welcoming atmosphere. Relatives began arriving early, filling the countryside resort with familiar faces and cheerful energy. Laughter echoed across the open grounds as children ran freely and older family members shared stories from the past. Mark moved comfortably through the crowd, greeting everyone with confidence and ease. He appeared relaxed, unaware that this day would become unforgettable for reasons he could not imagine. Laura stayed close but quiet, observing everything carefully. She noticed how naturally Mark accepted praise from family members who admired his work ethic and devotion to family. Compliments about his marriage were offered casually, reinforcing the image he had carefully built over the years. Each kind word felt heavy to Laura, not because it was false in intent, but because it was based on a lie. Still, she maintained her composure, responding politely and offering calm smiles when expected. Throughout the day, shared meals and group activities brought everyone together. Family photos were taken, capturing moments of apparent joy and unity. Mark stood confidently beside Laura, his expression steady and untroubled. To those watching, they looked like a strong couple, unchanged by time or challenge. Laura felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her, knowing these images would soon represent the final moments before everything changed. As conversations flowed, Laura listened more than she spoke. She paid attention to Mark's tone, his ease, and the way he seemed entirely secure in his place within the family. There was no sign of guilt or concern, only comfort and familiarity. This deepened Laura's resolve. The contrast between the truth and the performance unfolding around her made silence unbearable. By late afternoon, the reunion reached its emotional peak. Stories of loyalty, trust, and family values filled the air. When the moment arrived, it did not come with raised voices or sudden chaos. It unfolded with a quiet intensity that drew everyone's attention. Laura stepped forward with a calmness that felt unnatural even to herself. The noise of the reunion faded as relatives sensed a shift in the atmosphere. What had been a day of celebration turned still, as if time itself had paused. Laura revealed the truth carefully and methodically. She presented what she had discovered over months of silent observation. Dates, repeated patterns, and undeniable connections were laid out in a way that left no room for confusion. The evidence was clear and structured, impossible to dismiss as misunderstanding or emotion. There was no anger in her actions, only certainty. That calm delivery made the revelation even more unsettling. As the truth settled over the gathering, expressions changed rapidly. Smiles disappeared, replaced by disbelief and shock. The image of Mark as the dependable husband and respected family man began to collapse in front of everyone. People who had praised his loyalty only moments earlier now struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the reality being exposed. The weight of the revelation pressed heavily on the group, leaving a deep silence in its wake. Mark stood frozen, unable to control the situation he believed was safely hidden. The confidence he had carried throughout the day drained away, replaced by visible unease. The carefully built walls around his secret life crumbled in a matter of minutes. There was no dramatic outburst, no attempt to argue. The evidence spoke louder than any reaction could. Laura felt a mixture of pain and release. The fear she had carried for so long began to loosen its grip. The truth was no longer hers to carry alone. In that moment, the reunion stopped being a celebration of family history and became a turning point. What had been concealed in private shadows was now fully exposed in the open. The silence that followed the exposure felt heavier than any argument could have been. Family members slowly began to process what they had learned, their reactions unfolding in quiet, painful ways. Some stepped back in disbelief, while others looked away, unable to face Mark. The trust that had been built over years dissolved almost instantly. What remained was confusion, disappointment, and a sense of collective betrayal that spread through the gathering. Mark's position within the family shifted immediately. The respect he once enjoyed was replaced by distance. Relatives who had defended him in the past no longer spoke in his favor. His actions were no longer a private matter. but a shared wound affecting everyone present. The image he had worked so hard to protect was beyond repair. The reunion ended early, not because of anger, but because the emotional weight became too much to carry. The consequences did not stop with family. News of the affair reached beyond the reunion, spreading through professional and social circles. The same connections that once supported Mark now viewed him with suspicion. His workplace, built on trust and cooperation, became uncomfortable. Opportunities began to fade as his reputation changed. The life he had balanced so carefully began to collapse under the pressure of exposure. Laura experienced a different aftermath. While the pain remained, it was no longer mixed with doubt. The uncertainty that had haunted her was gone, replaced by clarity. She faced difficult emotions, including grief for the marriage she believed she had and relief that the truth was finally known. Family members approached her with support and understanding, recognizing the strength it took to reveal such a painful reality. As days passed, the shock softened into reflection. The affair had reshaped every relationship involved, leaving permanent marks. What had started as a hidden connection now stood as a lesson about consequences. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a quiet that felt unfamiliar to everyone involved. The reunion became a memory people avoided discussing, yet its impact lingered in every interaction. For Laura, the days felt heavier but clearer. She no longer questioned her instincts or replayed moments in search of hidden meanings. The truth, once revealed, had removed the uncertainty that had slowly eroded her sense of self. What remained was the difficult task of rebuilding a future from the ruins of trust. Laura began to distance herself from the life she had shared with Mark. The routines that once defined her days now felt empty and unnecessary. She focused on independence, learning to stand without relying on promises that had proven fragile. The pain did not disappear, but it changed shape, turning into resolve. She understood that survival was not about forgetting the betrayal, but about refusing to let it define her entirely. Mark faced a different reality. Isolation replaced admiration, and silence followed him where praise once existed. The exposure had stripped away not only his marriage, but his sense of control. The double life he believed he managed so well left him with nothing solid to hold on to. Every consequence traced back to a single decision to deceive rather than be honest. The family, too, was changed. Trust was no longer automatic, and relationships carried a cautious distance. Yet within that damage grew a deeper understanding of truth and accountability. The reunion that began as a celebration ended as a reminder that appearances can be dangerously misleading. In the end, this story became more than a tale of betrayal. It stood as a warning about secrets and the cost of hiding them. Truth may arrive quietly, but when it surfaces, it reshapes lives completely. What was exposed that day could never be undone, but it ensured that no one involved would ever mistake silence for loyalty again.